Welcome back to a Fifth of Jack Gaming, where today we're going to be diving in on a revisit of a deck tech that we ended up having. I told you guys that we're going to end up doing an upgrade to this deck, and oh my goodness, we have. The deck that we have is the Elven Empire, led by Lathril, the Blade of Elves. Costs 2, a black and a green. For a legendary elf, which obviously it has to be legendary because that's our commander in this deck. Elf Noble, it's a 2/3 body. Has Menace or Menace, means that it could only be blocked by 2 or more creatures. And then whenever it deals combat damage to a player, create that many 1/1 green elf warrior creature tokens equal to its power. So however much damage it ends up doing to the player, you get that many elves. Then it has this little part that has tap 10 untapped elves you control. Each opponent loses 10 life, and you gain 10 life. Alright, so last time I showed you guys this was a pre-con. So I'll put it this way. Let me split that down there like that. That's how many cards is in the pre-con. It's going to be 99 other cards. So, with that said, I did some changes and everything. And what was in the deck is cut down to this. I would say this is heavily modified. It barely has the essence of the original deck into it. In fact, this deck has 45 cards that's still from the pre-con in it. So I did obviously upgrade the basic lands and everything into a full art lands, which I didn't include in the upgrades. So I ended up switching over to the different full arts. Like I said, that wasn't counted into it. I did make one art swap, however. I took this Herald, swipe the commander, Herald, King of Scalpar, and I ended up switching it out for the different art from that to showcase foil. So technically that's still part of the original deck. And before I get going over the spice that we added into it, I'll show you the stuff that we ended up taking out. So we took out Jungle Howl, Gagari Rock Farm, Scout Farm, Hull or Elder Hull, Path to Ancestry, Fouled Orchard, Gagari Gilgate. So the big justify of taking these guys out is I didn't want to have tapped lands. All these come into play tapped, which will end up slowing the deck down. I wanted to be able to have the option to have it not be coming in tapped at the best or at the worst case scenario. And if it does come into play tap, it has to be a pretty baller reason for it to be in the deck. So that's the main reason that we cut that. And then other cards that we ended up cutting, I'm not going to go over the cards themselves. I'm just going to go over what they're cut because we've already done that. We've already been through that thing. Serpent Soul Jar costs 2. See, here I go, back into the habit. I cut that because it kind of felt like a non-bow is the reason why I ended up cutting it, because of exiling it, and I wanted to be able to keep on playing. Pack of the Serpent. Putrefy. Felt like it was too expensive, and it did a nice things, but the way I ended up going was more of a combo style with it. As you would be seeing with our Legacy Elves video that we have in there, I was trying to essentially catch that deck with this deck. Poison Tip Archer, just too expensive for what's going on. Molder Vein Reclamation, again, a little bit more too expensive for it. Gagari Finebreaker, Voice of Many, Sylvain Messenger. It's kind of a nice little tutor and everything, but I kind of felt like it was too expensive, and I didn't feel like it kind of paid off with that deck, with instant testing. Spring Brew Druid, Mara, Thorn of the Glade, Prowess of the Fair, Jaded Scar Archers, Farhaven Elf, Elvish Rejuvenator, Lasana Scarblade, Pride of the Perfect, White Massacre, Nora Draga Chieftain, White Callers, Ambition's Cost, Elder Fane Ritualist, Jasper Sentinel, Risk the Exiled. He was one of the final cuts because I kind of wanted to keep him in here because of life gain, but ultimately it didn't end up mattering. Abomination of Land War. So it was nice because it's Vigilance and Menace, and it could end up being a big guy, but I didn't have too much grave stuff going on with this deck, so that's where he ended up not making the cut for it. Ruthless Widower, Cultivator Blades, Mask of Martyrs, Voice of the Woods, Twin Blade Assassins, Scunfar Shadow Mage, Crown of Scunfar. I know, it was very tempting with this, but I just didn't end up wanting to go that route. That's the big thing about that. Bounty of Scunfar, Harvest Season, Crashity of Wars, Poison the Cup, Return Upon the Tide, Tigris Shadow, Roots of Wisdom, and finally, the Binding of the Old Gods. I also think I cut a couple of basic lands in there for more mana fixing. But with that going over, let's dive in and what we ended up adding to the deck. Alright, we'll start off with this Undergrowth Stadium. Enters the battlefield tapped unless you have 2 or more opponents. In Commander, we end up having more than one opponent, especially where I end up playing as more of a casual mixture with it. Also taps for a green and a black. Overgrown Tomb counts as a swamp or a forest, so if we end up doing any kind of fetching or anything like that, I'll be able to go that route. And then as it comes into the battlefield, or as you put it in play, you may pay 2 life. If you do, it doesn't come into play untapped, or it comes into play untapped instead of being tapped. Something that I wanted to have is untapped mana. Your life total is a resource. Just make sure you end up using it the proper way or the proper time. Gilt-Leaf Palace. As it enters the battlefield, reveal an elf card from your hand. If you do, it comes into play untapped. If you don't, it comes into play tapped. Taps for a green and a black. Or a green or a black. Excuse me. Land of War Waste. Taps for a colorless, but I could pay 1 life to tap it for either a green or a black. Woodland Cemetery enters the battlefield tapped unless you control a swamp or a forest. It taps for a green or a black. And this is what I like to call a filter land. Taps for a colorless, or we could pay a black or a green, and then we could add either 2 black, a black and a green, or 2 green. Then we have Fabled Passage, which lets us to have a little bit more mana fixing, where we get to sacrifice it, search our library for a basic land card, and put it onto the battlefield, and then shuffle your library. If you control 4 or more lands, it comes into play untapped, which is kind of nice and everything. It lets us go mana fix for either green or black. This deck is slightly more on the green side, though. Talking about green, you have Amaya, Cradle of the Growth. Is a legendary land, and each land is a force in additional to its other types. So mana fixing is definitely staying strong in that green. We got some shenanigan fetching with Dryad Arbiter, or Dryad Arbor. It's a forest, and the Dryad is a 1/1 where it's a land creature. It's green, so it's going right down the pipeline. Also something really good to sacrifice to some other cards that we have in here now. Pendlehaven, taps for a green, or you could tap it. Target 1/1 creature gets +1/+2 until end of turn. So early game, it could end up saving any like a small combo piece that we have now in the deck. Wirewood Lodge, taps for a colorless, or you could pay a green, tap it to untap a target elf. So this is an infinite combo that goes along with Arbor Elf, and that's the main reason that we have that right here. Is that I believe in every deck it should have a combo in there that goes infinite, just in case that way you don't have to have a 3-4 hour long game. Sometimes it's a little bit more fun playing another game. Green Sun Zenith, common tutor for it. You can pay X and a green. It's a sorcery. You get to search your library for a green creature card with a converted mana cost of X or less. Put it on the battlefield and then shuffle your library. Shuffle Green Sun Zenith into its owner's library. And then we wanted more tutoring, so we have a demonic tutor. It costs us 1 and a black for a sorcery, and we get to search our library for a card. That's right, a card, so we get to search for anything. And then we get to put that card in our hand, and then we have to shuffle our library. Lets us find that combo piece that we're missing or anything that we end up wanting to pick up at that time. Another big win con is Finale of Devastation. It's X and 2 green for a sorcery. Search your library and or graveyard for a creature card with a converted mana cost of X or less and put it onto the battlefield. If you search your library this way, shuffle it. If X is 10 or more, the creatures you control get +X/+X and gain haste until end of turn. So it also makes another little Cradlehoof Behemoth, which is the peanut butter and the jelly, 2 elves. Then we have an instant of a Gagari Charm, costs a green and a black. Choose one. All creatures get -1/-1 until end of turn. Destroy a target enchantment, or regenerate each creature you control. This also helps us with some of the board wipes. This is the main reason that we have it for regeneration. And then it also has the flexibility of destroying an enchantment. I mean, also taking -1 is taking out something that's a small little piece that from the other opponent will also help out with it. Chord of Calling. Costs is X and 3 green for an instant. Has Convoke. So Convoke is something where we can end up tapping a creature to make it cost 1 colorless less. So whatever we put into X could be that many creatures. Then we get to search our library for a creature card with a converted mana cost of X or less and put it on the battlefield, then shuffle your library. Common and combo, we're trying to combo out. You flood the board and then play like a big old Cradlehoof and just end the game there. Talking about looking for Cradlehoof, Natural Order. Costs us 2 and 2 green for a sorcery. As an additional cost to casting this spell, sacrifice a green creature. Remember that little Dryad that we had earlier? This thing goes pretty good with that. Search your library for a green creature card and put it onto the battlefield, then shuffle. It allows us to be able to look for any creature card that's green that's in here. Secret, that's most of this deck. I would have to say it's probably about 95% of this deck is green. Or has green in it. But it gets that win con. Talking about win cons, we have Triumph the Hordes. Costs us 2 and 2 green. It's a sorcery. Until end of turn, creatures you control get +1/+1 and gain trample. And then it gains this little thing called Infect. So something with Infect is that no matter what game that you're playing, Infect's kind of like poison, but they're separate little counters, but you only need to get the opponent to have 10 Infect counters before you lose the game. That's what this going over with is. So like kind of a little cheaty face to be able to win the game with. I normally play it for the trample, but there's been a couple times that we had to do a little shenanigans to win the game, which is kind of easy with elves. And then with the commander's ability, whatever does damage and everything, I put a couple of equipments in there to facilitate and help out with the damage to be able to poop out more elves with it. Black Blade Reforged costs 2. It's a legendary artifact. Equipment. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each land that you control. Equip legendary creature costs 3. And then the regular equip, it costs 7. So yeah, it's expensive on the equip cost, but we get a 4 discount putting that on our commander. Or even with 7, it's still not an outside chance to be able to do that with elves. Elves ramp like crazy, especially this deck. The other artifact that we have in there for it is Trailblazer Boots. It's an equipment. Equipped creature has non-basic land walk. So that means if they have non-basics that our creatures will be able to just walk in there and not have to be worried about being blocked or anything like that. You're playing commander, most of the time people have non-basics. So that's going to be playing a big role into it. The equip cost costs 2, so it's not too bad. And the equip cost. Umber Meadow costs 3 for an equipment. Equipped creature has pay 3. Untap this creature. That's right, untap. It's a little bit different. It gets +2/+2 until end of turn. Equip cost costs 0. So there's a couple cards in here that makes it go infinite mana with it, so we can do whatever we want with that as well. Talking about infinite combos, a common elf card is Staff of Domination. Costs 3 for an artifact. We can pay 1, untap the staff. Pay 2, tap it, gain 1 life. Pay 3, tap it, untap a target creature. Again, the crazy infinite mana combo, and we can end up doing a lot of things. Pay 4, tap it, tap a target creature. Pay 5, tap it, or draw a card. So with elves, untapping Shenanigans is really, really nice, especially once you get one of the big mana dorks that lets you end up tapping for a bazillion manas. Or what feels like a bazillion manas. Now we're going to jump over into the Planeswalkers. Talvar Kell costs 2 and 2 green. It's a player Talvar. Comes in with 3 loyalty counters. And then it also has a static ability of elves you control have tap, add a black. Its +1 is to put a +1/+1 counter up to 1 target elf. Untap it, it gains Death Touch until end of turn. Its +0 is create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. Its -6 is you get an emblem with whenever you cast an elf spell, it gains haste until end of turn. And you draw 2 cards. So it's I want to say it's a mini glimpse of, or it's another glimpse of nature where you're able to play an elf, draw 2 cards. Play an elf, draw 2 cards. You can keep on going. The other Planeswalker that we have is Fairlease. Llanowar's Flurry. Costs 3 and 2 green. It's a legendary Fairlease. It comes in the 3 counters. And it also can be a commander if you are looking for other commanders to be able to play. Its +2 is create a 1/1 elf druid creature token. It has tap, add 1 green. Its -2 is destroy a target artifact or enchantment, which is nice. And its -6 is draw a card for each green creature you control. It's another Regal Force. Alright, and then we ended up going down all the way down to 1 enchantment. Costs 3 and a green's an enchantment, and Guardian Project. Guardian Projects lets us, whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, if you don't have the same name as another creature you control, or the creature card in your graveyard, draw a card. So with elves, we have a whole bunch of elves, and obviously with Commander, You only can play one unless the card says otherwise. So most likely we're going to be drawing a whole bunch of cards, which is what we're shooting for. Because with elves, you drop your hand, and you want to refill that hand back up as quickly as you can. That way you can either recover from a board wipe, or you can end up really pushing that entire chance to be able to win that game. So something that likes to have a huge board state is Cradlehoof Behemoth. Costs us 5 and 3 green, so that's 8 in total. For a big old beast, that's a 5/5 body. So the big thing is that it has haste, and when it enters the battlefield, creatures you control gain trample, awesome, and get +X until end of turn, where X is the number of creatures you control. That's why it's the peanut butter to the elves' jelly. Because you have a whole bunch of elves out there, let's say we have 10 elves out there, it'll end up getting +11 across the board. So that simple 1/1 is now a 12/12 with trample. Sounds pretty good to me. Sign me up. And if we need to draw more cards, we have Regal Force, who costs us 4 and 3 green for an elemental. It's a 5/5 body. And when it enters the battlefield, draw a card for each green creature you control. Again, we're going to have a bazillion creatures, so draw a bazillion cards to refill our hands. A little bit more drawful with Toski, Bearer of Secrets. Costs us 3 and a green for a little legendary squirrel. Could be a commander. It's a 1/1. This spell can't be countered. It's indestructible. And then it has to attack each combat if able. So after you play it, you have a nice little blocker, but after that, it's always attacking. Whenever a creature you control deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. So if we have a bunch of creatures attacking, we can draw a whole bunch of cards and keep on the pain train going. We're going to do some more tutoring with Fierce Empath. Costs us 2 and a green. For an elf, that's a 1/1. And when it enters the battlefield, you may search your library for a creature card with a converted mana cost of 6 or greater. Reveal it, and then put it into your hand, and then shuffle your library. So there's only really, honestly, 2 targets in here, but we really want those 2 targets. We obviously want Cradlehoof, which is probably the go-to tutor up creature, and then it's Regal Force, which could end up drawing a whole bunch of stuff. To be dead honest with you, with these guys, if it goes to our hand, it's not the end of the world, but we're going to prefer pulling them out and putting them on the battlefield. Especially Cradlehoof. We want that to be the win con that comes out of it. So another big thing about making all the lands into forests, it helps out with us Elvish Champion, which costs us 1 and 2 green. All elves. So you gotta be careful when you end up playing this, because that's all elves across the table. Not just your elves, but anyone that is playing elves will end up gaining a +1/+1 and gain Forest Walk. Forest Walks means if they have a forest, they can't block it. So with the entire thought process with the Cradle, it ends up making it so all their lands are a forest. So it makes it so all elves could end up walking right on in, doing their damage. And then with a whole bunch of mana, we need something to be able to drop it into. Azuri, Renegade Ladier, costs us 1 and 2 green for a legendary creature. Another possible commander if you want to play an elf ball. And it's normally the go-to for elf ball. But I wanted to have black, that's why we're going with Lathril. We could pay a green, regenerate another target elf, or we could pay 2 and 3 green. Elves you control get +3/+3 and gain trample until end of turn. That's where the mana dump comes into it, where you can end up making your creatures gain +3/+3 and trample by a bazillions, because obviously most of our cards are elves. Has a 2/2 body, and it's an Elven Warrior or Elf Warrior. Now we still do have some tutoring in there with Elvis Harbinger, costs us 2 and a green for an Elf Druid with a 1/2 body. And then when it comes into play, You may search your library for an elf card, reveal it, and then shuffle your library and put that on top. Tap, add 1 mana of any color. It's a nice little mana dork as well. It's a little bit more on the expensive side. But then we also have Circle of Dreams Druid, costs us 3 green. For an elf druid, that's a 2/1 body. But here's the big kicker for this one. Tap, add 1 green for each creature you control. That's right, 1 creature, or each creature that you control, you add 1 green for it. You don't see it in here because I don't have one, but there is the Cradle. Gaia's Cradle, which ends up doing the exact same thing on a land. It doesn't tap for any mana unless you end up having creatures for it. But it's super broken, but it's also super expensive. I think you can pick one up, like, beat up edition for maybe like $1,000. It's because it's on the reserve list, so it's a little bit expensive with the brokenness. So it's not going to get reprinted anytime soon. Sad face. Then we have Savala, Heart of the Wilds. Costs us 1 and 2 green for a 2/3 legendary elf scout. Another possible commander, another really good commander. Whenever another creature enters the battlefield, its controller may draw a card if the power is greater than each other creature's power. So it can end up possibly drawing a card. Not so much in this, but also has pay a green, tap it, add X amount of mana in any combination of colors where X is the greatest power among creatures you control. That's where we end up having it. If we have a Cradle Hoof or anything like that, we'll end up being able to at least gain 5 mana and keep on going. And then we have Scumfar Avenger, costs us 1 and a black. For an Elf Berserker, it's a 3/1 body. Whenever another non-token Elf or Berserker you control dies, you draw a card, and you lose 1 life. Trying to replace that other elf and be able to have more draw fuel is kind of nice. Like I said before, your life total is a resource. Just got to be smart how you end up using it. Elvis Visionary costs us 2 and a green for 1/1. And when it enters the battlefield or enters play, we get to draw a card. So there's shenanigans to bounce this back into your hand and be able to play it and keep on drawing cards. That's kind of like a combo, classic combo that is with the combo decks. Another newest one is Elvis Warmaster. Costs us 1 green and 1 for an elf warrior. It's a 2/2 body. Whenever 1 or more elves enter the battlefield under your control, create a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token. This ability triggers only once each turn. Has ability to pay 5 and 2 green. Elves you control get +2/+2 and get Death Touch until end of turn. So yeah, it only creates 1 elf, but that 1 elf could be something amazing. I mean, with Lathol, it takes 10 of them, and we could tap them and gain 10 life and make everyone lose 10 life. So when I talk about old school shenanigans, this is another card that ends up playing with it. Priest of Titania costs 1 and a green for 1/1. It has the thing of tap, add 1 green for each elf in play. Play this as a mana source. So that means we end up gaining life as that. So that means each elf. That's not just your elves, that's everyone's elves. So you end up looking at the board and be able to take account and be able to play it. Plus it also goes into a couple infinite mana combos with Umbra Mantle or the entire Staff of Domination. Dwayne's Elite costs us 1 and a green. For an elf warrior, that's a 2/2. And when it enters the battlefield, if you control another elf, put a 1/1 green elf warrior creature token on the battlefield. Adds more mana or adds more elves to the mana pool when it comes into play. That's the main reason why we jumped it. Puts it to 2/2, so it's not too bad. Scavenging Ooze is another answer for graveyard decks. It's a perfect answer that you end up seeing. It's an amazing answer that helps out with that. Scavenging Ooze costs us 1 green and 1 for a 2/2. It's an ooze, obviously. Pay 1 green. See, just pay the green. You don't have to tap it or anything. So you can end up using this multiple different times. Exile a target creature from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, put a +1/+1 counter on Scavenging Ooze, and you gain 1 life. So we get a bonus if it's a creature. But if you need to take out one of their combo pieces that ended up making it to the graveyard, or a big threat or anything like that, we have that flexibility to be able to do that with this guy. A classic combo piece, or piece that lets us bounce back cards, like that Elvis Visionary earlier, is Quarian Ranger. Costs 1 green for a 1/1. Return a forest card to its owner's hand. Untap a target creature and use this ability only once per turn. Drawing another card could be an ensure to be able to get to anything that you're looking for. And then we have Arbor Elf. Costs 1 green. For an elf druid, that's a 1/1, and it's simply untap a target forest. Super nice. Farhaven Elves costs 1 green. For an elf druid, that's a 1/1. Tap, add a green. Elves like to ramp. That's what we're doing. Goldreed Tramper costs 1 black. As an elf druid, it's a 1/1. We can tap it, pay 1 life, add a green to your mana pool, spend this mana only to cast elf creature spells. Or we could tap it, attack an elf you control against Death Touch until end of turn. Flexibility. Here's another crazy elf. Jaga Tree Speaker. Costs 1 for an elf druid. So here's the big kicker that comes out of it. You can tap it, or we can make it up to a level up. So a level up is when you end up paying to get it at a certain level. And we only can do that during sorcery speeds. So like this one, it costs 1 green and 1 to level it up. And it has these special abilities depending on how many counters it has on it. So at level 1 through 4, tap, add 2 mana to your mana pool. And then at 5 or more, it has elves you control have tap, add 2 mana to your mana pool. So which makes all of your elves to be able to tap, add 2 mana, which is amazing. When it first comes in, it's a 1/1. When we get it up through 1 through 4, it's a 1/2. And then when we get to the 5 and plus, it's a 1/4. Very nice. Another comboistic card is Heritage Druid. Costs 1 green for a 1/1 elf druid. Big thing is it has tap 3 untapped elves you control at 3 green mana to your mana pool. So if you notice, it doesn't have to have so many sickness or anything like that. So the turn that you play an elf, you can tap 3 of them the exact turn that they come in and be able to have the green mana to be able to play anything else or keep on what people like to say, throw up a whole bunch of cards onto the deck. Llanowar Elves costs 1 green for a 1/1 elf druid who has tap, add 1 green mana. Just old ramping. More Shenanigans with Wirewood Symbiote costs a green for an insect. It's a 1/1. Return an elf you control to its owner's hand. Untap a target creature. Activate this ability only once each turn. So some shenanigans that you can end up doing is you can end up popping that back and be able to keep on going. With some of the cards, like Quarian Ranger, will let something go on. Quarian Ranger lets us do a land. This lets us do a creature. Another one that we can end up having a mana dump into is Jaga Warcaller. Costs 1 green for an elf warrior that's a 1/1. And it has this little thing called multi-kicker. So we can pay this as many times as we want. The multi-kicker cost ends up putting that many counters onto that creature. And it has to be an additional to this. So when we're playing it, you could kick it 50 times. So it costs 100 mana, but 101 mana actually, to be able to play it. But here's the kicker though, why you end up doing that. Jaga Warcaller enters the battlefield with a +1/+1 counter for each time it was kicked. Other elves you control get +1/+1 for each other +1/+1 counter on Jogga War Caller. So in that situation, if we ended up kicking it 50 times, that 50 +1/+1 counters. So all the elves will be gained +50 +50 because of this guy. Holy smokes. I don't think I've ever seen that, and I don't think I want to see that. That should be an overkill situation. Borchlor Ranger costs 1 for an elf that's a 1/1. Tap 2 untapped elves you control, add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Also has Morph, where you can pay a green, flip it over, it becomes a 2/2 creature, and then when you turn it face up, for a mana cost of 3. Main reason that we have this is because it's not also creatures don't be summoned or affected by summoning sickness, because we can end up tapping 2 untapped elves right away and using that mana to be able to do other things with it. More mana ramp and the flexibility of tapping for a green or a black. Some more graveyard shenanigans with Deathrite Shaman. You can pay either a green or a black. That's what that little hybrid mana is for. It's an elf shaman that costs or has a power and toughness of a 1/2. We could tap it, exile a target land card from a graveyard, so that's any graveyard. Add 1 mana of any color to your mana pool. Or we could pay a black, tap it, exile an instant or sorcery card from a graveyard. Each opponent loses 2 life. Or the third option is pay a green, tap it, exile a creature card from a graveyard, and you gain 2 life. It's like a 1-drop planeswalker. Having 3 different abilities is amazing. And the flexibility of that is amazing as well. It actually ended up being too good for Modern and ended up getting banned in Modern. However, in Commander, it's just fine, and it has a nice comfy home in this deck. Boral Druid costs us 1 green for a snow creature. It's an elf druid. It's a 1/1. Has tap, add 1 colorless. Like we're trying to do, we're trying to ramp away. It was a Deep Shadow. Costs us 1 green. For an elf druid, that's a 1/1. Tap, add a black to your mana pool. Elves of Deep Shadow does 1 damage to you. Just a simple easy. And last but not least card, Allosaurus Shepherd. The big old staple that came out of Jumpstart. That's a bazillion dollars. I was lucky enough, popped it open out of a Jumpstart. But if you have one and you have an elf deck, you need to add it to it. Here's why. It costs us 1 green for a 1/1. Cheap, awesome, perfect. Allosaurus Shepherd can't be countered. Okay, liking it. Green spells you control can't be countered. That's any green spell that you end up playing. So you tend to see like your natural order end up getting countered and you still have to sacrifice a creature. This card says, forget your counters. That's not happening. Because it's a green spell, it still goes right through. And if that's not enough for you, you have the ability to pay 4 and 2 green, and until end of turn, elf creatures have a base power and toughness of a 5/5 and become dinosaurs in additional to their other creature types. So, you also have a mana dump on it. Talking about crazy broken shenanigans. It has everything that you're looking for in an elf card. It's cheap. It's an elf. Now, it can't be countered. Green spells that you control can't be countered. That's amazing. And then it also has where it can end up being a mana dump into it and end up having a 5/5 and it becomes a dinosaur and everything. So being +5/+5 or making it a 5/5 creature for all your elves can end up making a pretty intimidating presence on the board. All right, so that's our big deep dive into the upgrades and why we ended up doing the upgrades for our wonderful commander deck, Lathel, the Blade of Elves. This is a more of a combo deck that comes over to be able to keep on playing your elves until you end up playing your Cradle Hoof to win the game. The biggest problem that you end up having is board wipes coming over with it, which if you have a card draw and you still have stuff going on, it shouldn't be that big of an issue to be able to recover from it. It's cheap, fast, and it goes in a hurry, and you never know when it could go off. We found that out with the testing and having fun over at my LGS. What did you think of the deck? What kind of upgrades would you do to it? Do you have an elf deck? Let us know down in the comments down below. Thank you for watching, and until next time. Oh, I almost forgot. Don't forget to share, subscribe, and hit that little bell icon to be notified about any of our future content if you're loving what we're putting out. Thank you for watching, and until next time, we'll see you later.